I'm Amy Odell. I'm the founder and CEO of the Jacob's Ladder Group. Honored to be here. Maeve, Tom, thank you so much for trusting us first and foremost with your most precious, Molly. That means more than anything. And Tom, for the invitation to come and do the podcast meant the world. So thank you again for that. And if y'all will just be patient with me today, as I was preparing for this, one of the things we say about Jacob's Ladder is that it's grounded in science and it's rooted in love, and both things matter. If you have a lot of scientific information and ways to apply that, especially to the population that we work with, there's value there. But if you have that without love, compassion, and honor for the person, then you're missing the biggest piece of the puzzle. And I will just tell you, as I was preparing for today, I had a previous presentation that was heavy on the science part, and I pulled out the slides, and I was like, I'm not feeling this. I'm not feeling this for today. And so with Jacqueline's help, we reworked everything between last night and this morning, because what I did feel heavily was, yes, the science part, but the part that is the compassionate care for the human being, and how you put those two pieces together. And I will also tell you, it's an acutely personal story for me. This is me when I was much younger, and my son when he was much younger. My son is 33 years old today, but I started it. If you heard the podcast, you heard a lot about that. So I won't say a ton about that today, but he was also came into this world with a complex set of neurodevelopmental variables. And no real clear, steadfast diagnosis. But of course, this was back in 1993 when a lot of the research and diagnoses weren't as prevalent as it is today. And I kind of look back at that time and think, in some ways, that was a real blessing, because what I was able to focus on is just this unique little human being that had such a profound set of gifts and little things that you would see in his spirit and his soul and the way he looked at you and how hard he tried. But on the other side of that was a lot of struggle and a lot of pain and a lot of heartache. And so both things were true. And I was in hospital work when he came along. I was director of a child and adolescent psychiatric unit up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And I will tell you, there was the day that I went to drop him off at his daycare, and the conviction was strong that that was his last day. And I went in, picked him up, drove to work, resigned from my job. And then I will tell you, it's been a faith journey. You'll hear me say this not a couple times, many times during this, but there was a conviction, and there was an opening of now what, which I had no answers to, but I just knew we weren't doing what we did yesterday. We were doing something different. And then my life's journey became about defining what that actually meant. And so I do believe that all of us, and especially my focus is on kids and young adults who have complex needs. And I believe no matter how complex the needs are, that there's a path forward. And it's really about understanding the unique, what we call neurobiological thumbprint, because no one is like us. No one's like you, no one's like you, no one's like me. We're all unique. And then it's even more profoundly important and impactful to know this about kids who have struggles, who need help. And so these are photos of us. And I'll tell you, I pull these out and I thought to myself, each one is just a little part of our story. But I'm gonna show you something about this. We lived up in Rabun County at the time when I was director of the hospital. Jacob couldn't stand up on his own. He had a hard time with all his mobility skills. And we would drive to this little Baptist church in Wolford Valley, if you've ever been in Rabun County. And we would go there to do part of his daily work because they had this little ramp. And it was an uneven surface with a slope. And he had to learn how to walk on the slope without doing a face plant every time. And so Jacob thought we were just playing around at the church, but in fact, he would go up and down that little ramp. And so a very strong memory that I have about that. If you look in this little picture, his face is dirty because we were outside in the mud, but you can see that his right eye is closed. And if you looked at 100 pictures of him when he was little, he would always close his right eye because he couldn't converge what's coming into the visual field for left and right. And so the only way that his brain could process information is if he closed the weaker eye. And so people look at that and go, oh, that's so cute, he's like a little pirate. And I'm like, yeah, it's not really like a pirate. It's like his brain had to learn how to converge and use both visual fields. He's left-handed, had such a hard time learning to write and to read. In the podcast I mentioned he couldn't recognize his letters. If you're left-handed and you're left-eyed, it means you're going to your right hemisphere all the time, right? So if you're a right-handed person, you're communicating with the left hemisphere and it's telling you logic and reason and execution of steps. But if you're left-handed, it's the right hemisphere that's firing all the time. That's the prominent hemisphere for you. So when you sit down and try to teach a little left-handed, left-eyed little boy or girl how to read, recognize letters and numbers, they're picturing the big things, right? The emotions, the feel in the room. What does it feel like? What are the sensory experiences there? And what happens to a lot of kids because of that is that they're deemed unable to learn. And what I'm here to tell you that I have passion about is every child I've ever come across is able to learn once you know how they've been neurologically put together. It's about how do you understand that and then program for them to overcome those challenges. So he had a hard time learning that, but now he can read anything he wants and he understands more than I do. His comprehension is off the charts because he does have a strong right hemisphere, but it took a lot of work. Every single day we probably did 2 hours on the floor, what we call mat work. And every child that's at our school, no matter if they're there for behavioral issues, mobility issues, sensory issues, cognitive delays, high levels of anxiety, they've all got some primitive areas in the brain that need to be re-networked. And if you go to the primitive areas of the brain first before you start worrying about how is their reading and how are they behaving, because hear this, if you know anybody that's struggling and has a child that's struggling and we want them to behave better, that's from here. You want the executive functioning to improve, then remember to close the drawers and put their socks in the hamper and finish their homework, blah, blah, blah. All that's important, but it requires this. And until you understand what the barriers are at a lower level, those things won't come online. But if you do the work from the ground up, they will come online. And so we spend a lot of time working on, and mostly it's movement orientation, but it's very specific as it would occur in normal and typical development. And this one I put in here because I call it the full potential picture. At this stage in his life, he actually didn't sit up and his eyes were never aligned. This is at the Dillard House in Raven County. There's still a seesaw there. And he was sitting on that end of the seesaw, and in that moment, I thought, that's the most whole that I think I've seen you. Your posture's good, your eyes are straight, you're holding on, you got peace. And so I had that hanging on my fridge forever. Because if I had days where I was forgetting that he could do better, I would look and I would remind myself that it's always about innate potential that each of us have, and we can just never give up on that. This is him as a young adult. He's a full-fledged teacher at the school. That whole right hemisphere piece and just how God put him together. He has deep empathy for other people, a compassionate heart and soul. He can meet people, understand people, and just works so beautifully with our students. And so I just couldn't be more proud of that. And this picture was from last week. His best friend had a baby, and he's holding the baby Bennett, and they asked him to be the godfather for this child. And so when I think about things like that, and I remember who he was when we were sitting on the kitchen floor in tears, and I think he's holding and cuddling and nurturing and a godfather to another person's infant, I think many things, but I think God is good. He's in every detail. He's writing a story. When we're in the one chapter, the one line of the story that feels painful, we don't know that there's a big picture at play. We only know the one piece we're in. And so now I have just been a party of watching this story unfold, and I just kind of, the overarching feeling I have is awe. I'll never understand it logically, but I have this feeling of awe of how God's hand has been at play all along. And I want to show you this. These are just kids that have come to my heart and mind recently for various reasons, and I'm going to say some tough things because it's the truth. And they don't mind their stories being told, but this beautiful young lady was with us for about 1.5 years. And when she was a baby, she was found beside a dumpster in China. And so the start of her life was there, laying outside of a dumpster. And she had some really tough years between someone finding her and her making her way to the U.S. and being in a beautiful adoptive family. But everything that she should have experienced from her first sense of safety and belonging in the world were missing. So the very basic parts of being a human being were void and null for her. And then everything she should have been able to experience and witness the first 4 or 5 years was also null and void. And so in presentation, you see this beautiful kind of put together young woman whose life behind the scenes was in complete disarray because of the pieces of her heart and soul and spirit that needed to be healed. And she was, after that 1.5 years with us, she did her work, made tremendous progress. She's in a private school in Tennessee, and she's flourishing and a star athlete, and her story ends on a super happy and hopeful note. This young woman was a star student at Roswell High School. She was a star lacrosse player and had a stroke on the field. She had to go to CHOA for 4 months or so and was in a coma, had to relearn every single thing. So when she came out of CHOA, she found us, the family found us. She was with us for about 1 year. She had to relearn how to speak again, how to walk again, how to use the right side of her body again. She could see her mom and know that it was her mom, but she didn't have the word mom, and if she did have it, she couldn't say it. So she literally had to put every piece of her life back into place. And let me tell you how that happens. It doesn't happen with a couple of therapy appointments per week for an hour. It's great to have that, but that's not what rewires and transforms a damaged and hurt brain. What transforms that situation is a day that's usually about 6 hours long, and there's no moment wasted. It's like the moment someone shows up to campus, and I mean the moment, because our team knows that we're receiving someone's tuition money, and sometimes grandma and grandpa are having to put it in the fund, you know what I mean? And so people will do anything they can to have the care that they need, and we don't take that lightly. We are there to deliver with diligence and excellence and not waste a moment, and the moments have to be exactly what someone needs. So for her, every area of injury had to have a very specific intervention. We had to do it over and over and over and over, and we did it for 1 year, 5 days a week, for about 6 hours a day. She was able to leave our program. She went to a private school. She graduated recently, and she came back to campus and applied for a job, and she now works in our infant program and is an absolute joy and wonder to have on campus. She takes care of the infants in our nursery, and her name is Ella, and I just feel super proud of her and grateful for her perseverance in her journey. This little precious one, it was Halloween, that's why people have interesting clothes on, and her mom Ella had a stroke in utero. So day of delivery, she has a stroke. She's in her birthing process, she's needing acute care and stabilization, and had a very tough prognosis. Her family lives in Argentina. They came from Argentina. We did our process. We worked with her for several months on campus, and now we monitor her care remotely. We still do her evaluation once a year. We rewrite her program. We oversee her care. We make sure it's happening with diligence, and we train a provider. And this little girl who I thought, chances were tough that she'd stand up and walk based on how she was presenting. And this last Halloween, she and I took a golf cart and went trick-or-treating in a country club not far from the school. And she ran up to every door independently, climbed the steps independently, asked for the candy independently, was super polite, didn't want to take more than 1 or 2 pieces, but people just wanted to heap the candy on her. She's like, oh, I shouldn't take the other kids' candy. But that was a little girl who was going to have a hard time ambulating with her mobility, but also speaking. And now she's very close to grade level in her academic programming. And this little doll up there in the corner, he's been with us about a year, and he was having a very difficult time navigating life, period. Lots of severe meltdowns, couldn't go to school and stay at school, sent home all the time. We call it fight or flight. If your nervous system is constantly overwhelmed, you don't feel safe in the world, you're looking for the next assault, and you'll either harm yourself or you'll harm someone else. And so that was his day, 24 hours a day, that was their life. And it's not him anymore. He's been with us a year. He's ready to transition out. He's going back to public school. And we had a talent show last weekend. I was able to see his parents and his grandparents. And nobody could even speak. We were all just in tears because we're just super proud of him. And it's hard to put those kinds of things into words. And this may be one of my favorite stories. Thomas came to us. The QR code takes you his parent testimonial. That's what that is. But he came to us, and this was his picture. This was him. He had not been able to leave the house, really, unless his mother was right by his side. And he had not been in school for 5 years. He had had a traumatic event at school. He had super high anxiety. And he just didn't go. So when we met him, it was kind of a win to get him on campus because he was too afraid to go anywhere. And I don't know, I just immediately loved this kid so much. And we get him to campus, and there was this whole thing, right? You don't go from hiding out for 5 years to get in the car and coming willingly every day. There was this whole process of how do we create safety and connection with you so that you will at least make it to the parking lot, maybe put 1 foot outside the car, So we built this whole process of him getting to campus and getting out of the car. And but you can see, as sweet and wonderful as he is, I looked at this morning and I thought, but the pain was in his eyes. He was always anxious and always afraid, and he just had that anxious pain most of the time. And I'll tell you, I think one of the reasons I love this story so much is that we actually did not have the staff available for him to join, and I wanted him to join so badly. And my son Jacob had some open time in his schedule. And I remember telling the team, I know this is a long shot, y'all are gonna think I'm crazy. Jacob's a young man, he's not, he hadn't been doing this a long time. But I think something about my Jacob, the compassionate spirit, the sense of safety, honoring another person, I think that he could be the right fit until we get him in and get him going. And the two of them, and they still have the most special bond. And so my son was the first teacher that got him in and got him going. And then he worked with us for about 3-4 years and was able to go back to public high school, has been on honor roll every semester since he got back. He had about 5 years of academics to close the gap on, which we were able to do. But his mom sent me that picture last week, which is why this brought this story back up to mind, because that was after his graduation ceremony, and he's headed off to college. And so again, profound evidence, right? I mean, each of those stories that I told you, they're so distinctly different. And what if the only option that people have in terms of a method or a methodology is to say, here's the program that we have. We'll do these steps because these are the steps we have. And then the person who's in great need has to come and fit within the 5 steps. It never works because everyone is so uniquely different and their challenges are. So what we've done is built this massive system based on everything we've ever learned for 30 years of work, over 4,000 kids, and said, if this is how the neurological system works, if this is how the sensory system works, if these are the drivers for emotional behavioral responses, if this is what inflammatory responses do to the brain, if this is what physiology means, like all those things, if all those things are considered, then there's over 5,000 variables to apply to the human being, which basically would apply to us too, right? I mean, what do we feel like when we wake up and we got 2 hours of sleep? What do we feel like if we drank too much? What do we feel like if we only eat junk food? I mean, it's the same conversation. It's just that the impact for these kids and young adults is so different. So the model that we use and the model that I'm so proud of is called the interpersonal whole brain model of care. This is our icon, and you'll see that there's that beautiful little heart in the center. And the heart in the center, if you go back to Thomas's story, the one who hadn't left home in 5 years, if we had brought him in and started with a behavior plan, which looks like consequence, reward, whatever, like he never would have made it in the door, frankly. But we didn't do that because we know better. We started with, wow, you're wounded. You're so afraid and you're so wounded. So how do we restore that inner part of you that doesn't trust humanity anymore and doesn't trust yourself in the world of humanity? And however long that took is what we were going to do before we worried about math, reading, social studies, science, or even his behaviors, because he's not choosing the behavior. That deep dysregulation internally is what's driving difficult behaviors. And so that's the heart of the model. We call it the spirit and the will. First you understand the spirit and will. And we made an assessment for spirit and will that doesn't exist outside our walls, and we had it validated. And so for every child we work with, we have an assessment that they answer these questions that are probing in these 4 major areas so that we can actually get a read of where we are. Then we go to neurodevelopmental, that's everything, that's all the neurological wiring in the brain. We go to physiological, the health of the system as a whole, there's a whole lot of variables there. Emotional, behavioral, relational, how is the kid showing up in the world? What do they say? What do they do? Are they self-harming? Do they harm other people? Is anxiety so high that it causes them to shut down? Lots of variables there. We believe everyone can learn. If you go back to my Jacob story, he was 6, 7 years old and he could not recall the letters in the alphabet. And I think on the podcast I shared that he learned how to read at a 5th grade level because I taught him whole word reading, because that's what the right hemisphere can do. It can see whole words, but the left hemisphere has to break it down letter by letter. He couldn't do that because he couldn't access that. But he learned how to read a newspaper, because most newspapers are written at a 5th grade level. But he couldn't identify the individual letters until later. And so that was just the path he had to take to build connectivity. So I'll never forget that, and I look at every child, and the team looks at every child in the same way. What is the barrier to learning, and how do we implement to overcome the barrier? And then social structure, everyone has a family, everyone has a community, there are siblings involved, it impacts everybody. So how does everybody come together to be working on the same plan? We take all those variables, and then we know that we're working on the integration of the whole person. I have to tell you this story super quickly. I'm going to start talking faster because there's too much I want to tell you, and I'm going to run out of time. This young man came to us when he was 13 years old. Difficult behaviors. No ability to regulate himself. He was in public school. He was on suspension a whole lot of the time. So he came to us. This is his family. His aunt adopted him. His uncle was there and just kind of helped support him. He needed the adoption process to happen for his well-being, and ended up coming and being a student when he was 13, 14, 15, 16. 4 or 5 years is my recollection. Family had a difficult time paying the tuition. But this aunt, Phyllis, she came to every free seminar that I did, and she'd ask questions, and she'd stay, and she'd be tearful, and I was like, good grief, you're pouring everything you can into this child. That's not even your biological child. And I just had such respect for her. And so she said, it may even be too late for him because he's a teenager. And I was like, no, it's not too late for him. So we figured out a way to barter for tuition. She had a farm in Canton. She had a John Deere tractor. I had just gone into $1.2 million in debt for our campus, which was keeping me up at night. I didn't know how I was going to pay for this. And I'm not a person that takes on debt, but I felt like it's where we needed to be. So it's our main little house. If you walk into Jacob's Ladder, it's the ladder building. But it just had a messy backyard and we needed help. And so here we are sitting with a $1.2 million debt. I didn't have a Kathy, which means we had no fundraising team and no development team. It was myself and the teaching staff. That's what we had. And Aunt Phyllis said, well, of course, we'll come and help you with your land and bring the tractor, which they did faithfully. But then what happened is that Brett, the uncle, he's actually a cousin. I've always said uncle, but now I know he's the cousin. He was the property engineer for the Hurt Plaza, where a lot of the foundations were housed in downtown Atlanta. And he knew that I was trying to figure out a way to continue to pay the teacher that was working with Jared. And he went to the chairman of the board of one of the largest foundations in Atlanta. And he said, these people are trying really hard, but we need a way to pay the teacher. And I know that you give money, and they have this tax credit program. So he asked if the chairman of the board would contribute to the tax credit program to help pay the teacher. And from that one thing that he did, the chairman of the board shows up at our front door. I didn't know this ahead of time. I didn't know he had had the conversation. And nice gentleman, he introduced himself by his first name, Maynard. And he spent about 2 hours with me. And this is back in like 2008. And from that one decision that he made, that one chairman of the board went around and spoke to other foundations. And they knew I needed a $1.2 million, which I had been told would take me 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years to raise, again, without a development team. And they came around us because of his conversation and gave us the $1.2 million within 7 months, and then gave us an extra $300,000 so I would have money to help maintain the building and the grounds. And so I say, we know that all things, God works for the good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose, because every day has shown me that. Every day has shown me that. And so I just say this to give these people a shout out. Jared went and presented at a national conference at Kennedy Krieger. Listen to this. I mean, I hear myself saying, and I go, how could this be possible? But that young man who I was a little bit physically afraid of, frankly, when he came, because he was big. He's a big guy, and he was big then. And I thought, okay, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep doing this. But it was a little touch and go. And he's standing up at Kennedy Krieger talking about neurodiversity and what's needed to help people be successful. Love that story. I share this because in the last 2 weeks, we've launched a weekly devotional, and I'd love to invite you to subscribe if you want to. But these 2 verses, I think, meant a lot to me as I was putting this together, because I know that the Lord has a plan for us, and I know the Lord has a plan for every kid. And I've seen it unfold time after time. And when you feel like you're at the end of the rope and you don't know where the resources are going to come from, I just know that all of our needs will be met. So I hang on to those 2 verses. So along the faith journey, if you just keep remembering, it was Jacob and I in a little cabin in Rabun County. That's where we started this from. We now have 17 acres of debt-free campus in the heart of Roswell. We have another campus in the Buckhead community. We've got programs, Hope School, which is for complex behavioral health needs, Compass, which is a workforce development, Community of Care, which is no matter where people are globally, we have a system and a process to help support them. And we've just established the group in 2024, which is the school, the IWBMC, which is our model of care, Ascend, a training institute, Pillar is a research institute, and Ahava, which is a custom-designed SaaS platform that houses everything that you need from point A to point B to serve kids and young adults no matter where they are. We've impacted over 43,000 lives. We've trained over 1,500 professionals. We've analyzed over 8,000 brain maps. And we're sitting on 30 years of retrospective data. So for 30 years, with all these complex situations that we've worked through, we've got all the pre and post data that could help inform a much greater conversation. And we know that, and we are passionate about figuring out how to get the word out there. It's a global crisis. 1 in 31 children will be diagnosed with autism. If you live in the state of California, it's 1 in 12 boys. That's what it is in the state of California. That's a 317% increase. 20% of our youth will be diagnosed not with just a mental illness, but with a debilitating mental illness. Those numbers are staggering. And just in the autism alone, by 2029, the economic cost is going to be over $15 trillion. So what that says to us is that there needs to be a solution. It needs to be a transformative solution, and it needs to be a scalable solution. And we believe, as egotistical as it might sound, we believe that we have it. And we feel deeply passionate about that, not because we set out to be those people, but because a team of people have been abundantly faithful to the one person in front of them to transform that life. And when you've seen it happen over 30 years, then you have very valuable information to share. Here's our entities. Again, the icons. IWBMC, the school, Ascend Training Institute, AHAVA, the platform, and Pillar, the stack of stones, is Pillar for the Research Institute. And I just want to share that the reason we have a stack of stones for Pillar is because it goes back to the Genesis scripture about Jacob and Jacob's ladder, and that he was traversing 800 miles on foot because he had to run away from a life that he couldn't quite fix. And when he needed to lie down to sleep, he lied down, but he had a stack of stones as a pillow. And that is when God Almighty came and met him and said, I'm going to sustain you and care for you and give you everything that you need. And so to me, that emblem says it's a pillar. And it recognizes the power of a holy God, but it also recognizes that I believe we'll have everything we need to do what he's called us to do. IWBMC, I'm going to skip this one because I've said a good bit about that. These are great images just from the school itself and a great parent quote. And I just wish you'd come visit sometime because, as Tom said in the podcast, if you didn't hear it, he's uncomfortable with the amount of love that's shared on campus. And I'm telling you, it's genuine. The people that show up every day are very, very, very talented and special people. And there is a lot of love on campus. Ascend Training Institute, I'm going to go back and just say, Sarah Cannon, if you get to see this, thank you. She runs the ship every day in terms of program integrity for all kids on campus. So Sarah Cannon gets a shout out. Ascend Training, Sarah Smith, Allegra Saunders, Megan Finnegan, they're putting together trainings. They're going across the nation. They're sharing information. We went through, the team did some really painstaking work over the last 3 years to become nationally accredited. We knew we needed to do that so that people wouldn't shoot us down before we got our foot in the door, and so we did the hard work to become nationally accredited. So all of the coursework is accredited, and this is a quote from a PhD speech and language pathologist who came to us, did a tour, saw the methodology, and has now adopted it for the school that she runs in South Georgia. We established Pillar because we knew we needed to. We need the model validated. We've published in peer-reviewed journals. We've done national conferences, white papers, and we just continue to publish and print everything that we know to be true. Behavioral changes, emotional regulation, cognitive output, AHAVA, everything that's needed. That's the customized software solution. So everything we've known to be true about how you interface with clients, kids, young adults who need you, all the evaluation metrics are in the system. All of the summary report, which Tom and Maeve will tell you is about 100 pages long, it is now synthesized and printed. There's an individualized program design, so out of 5,000 interventions, no one's day will ever match anyone else's because everybody has a unique neurobiological thumbprint and their day needs to be built for them. We have 30 years of data, so many data points that can be shared. We have all the training and certification in the platform. So really all that someone needs to do, and this was important to me personally, because I see so many kids who have so many people with their hands in the pie for the care of a kid, but nobody ever meets or speaks to each other. And so there's a lot of disconnected conversations. So we built into the portal where any professional that knows or touches that child can have shared communication with parents' consent. So it's everything from A to Z that a school or a clinic or a family needs to serve their child. We're utilizing AI now to take all this. So this is a little teeny tiny snapshot. There's like thousands and thousands of these variables. We do the lab work. We do a brain map analysis, so we see exactly what connectivity patterns are in the brain. We created this in-house to say, because when it comes down to it, it's about how the brain's connecting or not connecting. It's either over-connecting, so you have rigid patterns, or it's under-connecting, so you have a void of patterns. And this spells out for you exactly the patterns that are over, so it says hyper-coherent, and then hypo-coherent. So no guesswork needed. I gotta go back to that one more second. If you've got a child stuck in fight or flight, high anxiety, it's like you get a description of a child per the parent, and then you see this map and you're like, okay, parent, you said this, 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 and this. You go to the map and you say it's because this, 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 and this. The neurological system is the great driver. Streamlined operational, this is a sample of how a program looks. There's a training video embedded for every one of the 4,000, 5,000 interventions, and then there's a written tutorial as well. We built a data collection and synthesis so that a parent could log in real time and pull up all of their child's interventions and then see percentage success at any given day, because we believe parents deserve that. We believe data is important. We believe if you're going to take responsibility for a human being's care, you should be closely monitoring what you're doing. Is it working? Is it not? If it's not working, then you need to understand why. You need to shift gears. All of the training interface is there. It can be on anyone's timetable to complete. It gives a certification either as a teacher role or as an evaluator role, but there's other trainings as well, like a foundational. So if there's a church group that wants to have just a foundational training for special needs kids, or kids with anxiety, or kids that are having a hard time fitting in, multiple levels of training are available. And that's that external professional access. There's my Romans 8:28, and I put that there to say, I started with love. I showed you what the science looks like, and there's a lot of both, right? On the science side, there's so many details that I really rushed through. But what I love is that all of those things could be created from a teeny tiny story, right? A teeny tiny beginning. But all these things could be created and used for the greater good. And I just believe that, I believe, and I want to always believe and remember that all things will work for good, even though you might be sitting in a painful spot. And anyone with a special needs child is going to be sitting in painful spots because your heart aches when you see them struggle. And that's just the way it is. But if we can remember that, yes, this moment feels painful, but there's a much bigger story being written, and we just have to be faithful in it. I think that's so important. Grounded in science, guided by love. So how do we stay true to the original calling and heart of the mission? Because we don't want to have mission drift. We don't want to lose the heart of why this started in the first place and how passionately we feel that it's possible for all kids to grow and thrive. And so how do we stay true to the original calling? I think part of it is that we acknowledge that there's a great creator and we're not it, that we're going to rely on that always. And you can never lose, no matter how scientific the model might be, or that we have a software platform or a research institute, it's always really just about the one kid, right? It's the one kid that you're with. It's the one kid that you're serving. It's that one family that's relying on you. And you'll use these other things as tools to move them forward, but it's always just about the kid, always about the one human being in front of you. And it's about the people that made the decision to show up and serve. The people that made the decision to show up, train, faithfully work every day, and deliver excellence. And it's hard to do that in a very trying field, but they amaze me daily. Our staff amazes me daily that truly, if you walk on campus, you don't see people disengaged or unhappy. You see people that are pouring themselves in with all that they are, and there's a precious soul receiving that in every moment. And I love that. It's probably one of the things that I feel the most proud of, is that we have great people. And so how do we stay true to the calling? We honor the one child, and we honor the staff that chooses to show up every day. And you can honor them by pouring into them personally, but you also need to honor them by giving them a financial future as best you can. And that's been a challenge, because in a one-on-one model as a nonprofit, it's been an extraordinary thing to just know that we've been able to do it. And we typically have not had an operational gap, but we have one now because we made the decision to invest upwards of 40 to 50% increase for every provider teacher. And we did that because they deserve it, because they're the people I want around me, and that they have to have a future. And so now we've got this gap, and we're just trusting that we are going to be able to fill it. So my last couple slides, y'all. Strategic vision is to always sustain excellence. Priority 1, to build our own financial resilience. And really our plan, we don't want to have to ask for money to close a gap. I'm super uncomfortable with that. We've never had to do it until the last 2 years. So our plan is that we launch a HAVA, that we will have people license the platform. We do our trainings. Those things will be licensable and create a revenue stream that creates self-sustainability again. And I believe with all that I am that that will happen. That's our plan. I want to reach people, kids, families, no matter where they are. We built in language translation features into a HAVA, so there's no language barrier, no matter where we would go globally. And we want to just completely continue to deliver the great care, but also be diligent in collecting the data that proves that positive outcomes are possible. In 5 years, we project, and our plan is to reach 500,000 lives. We'll train 10,000 professionals. Hopefully, we'll be introduced into 500 institutions over a 5-year period. But what feels the most important right now, what do we need? We're going to need $1.2 million in our annual fund that goes and pours right back into the people. That's priority 1. Because without that, frankly, I don't think we'll get to the larger vision. We have to have our good people, and they've all given so much and they know so much, and they're just transformational people in and of themselves. And so we'll need about $4 million over the 5 years to get to the 500,000 lives, but we know that that's possible. Goal 1 is to close our financial gap so we can just keep moving towards that goal. And we believe our need will be met. It always has been. You never know how, but it always has been, and we believe that it will be again. So I'm sure I'm over time, guys, but I really appreciate you being here and hanging with me, and it's an honor. It's an honor to be here. Thank you. And thank you, Tom.